the groups that are concerned mothers who don't want chemicals in their children's food or their water and want them to grow up healthy. That has nothing to do with being rich and snobby. It's a survival and wanting us all to be healthy.
Is it possible to make shampoo without formaldehyde? Like, can that be when that's the question, the answer is a
That's
clear yes. All the ways that it's possible to manipulate public opinion, they're hitting it hard. The power that corporations have here, it's total government capture.
when I read your take on it or your report, I just went, oh Christ, that's a real thing. My Instagram is full of people speaking out about this stuff, which gives me massive hope. Welcome to Sustainability for Sinners, a non-judgmental, informative, and hopefully helpful place you can learn about sustainability. I focus on health, water, food, energy, antibiotics, detoxifying your life, and much, much more. If you like what you hear, then go ahead and hit the follow button. Enjoy! Hi, Stacy. Welcome. Happy to have you. It's a real honor, and I think I'll do an intro separate to this to explain who you are, but very much appreciate that you're here today talking to me. And yeah, I guess could we just start off with what are you up to at the moment? You have a massive amount of work that you've been doing over the years. You're a veteran pretty much in all of the research that I've been also looking into, but you've got decades under your belt. So is there anything interesting that you're doing at the moment?
Well, it's really great to be with you. Thanks for having me. I find this all fascinating and disturbing, the work I've been doing for, as you said, decades, looking into what are the health impacts of the chemicals in our environment, in our products, in our food, and how are those linked to the rise in chronic diseases. And I think we all know people who are suffering from cancer, young people dealing with infertility, lots of diseases driven by our industrial economy. So most recently, I work for a group called US Right to Know, and we investigate corporate wrongdoing and government failures that harm health. Very big beat. There's lots to report on. But I've been focusing on industry disinformation and the ways that pesticide companies really go at their critics, lie to the public, manipulate the science, spend tens of millions of dollars on front groups that spin the story that we need pesticides and ultra processed foods to, enjoy modern life. And really they're propping up what I see as a very unsustainable, failing business model at the heart of the food system. So I think it's one of the most crucial things to take on as advocates for human life to figure out how are we going to have a sustainable, truly healthy food system into the future as the climate's changing, as so much is happening to destabilize environmentally. We have to feed ourselves. So I think it's really a crucial number one priority to figure out how to transform our food system in healthy ways.
Absolutely. Um, the report I read, the Merchants of Poison, was just gobsmacking, and the detail you went into there. I mean, for anyone who hasn't read it or is unaware of the tactics the big industry are pushing, it's just unbelievable. And what Stacy, you co-wrote it, so I don't want to. Did you co-write it? You did.
I did. I was a
Uh,
lead author. I also wrote it with Anna LePay
right.
and Kendra Klein, and it was a years long effort.
Yeah.
Um,
Amazing because I mean it's just backed up with facts and figures and examples of things, so you know it's not made up. Basically, it's like the opposite to disinformation or misinformation. It's just, I mean, when you read it and you kind of, it's shocking, really shocking. And I would love if the world was aware of this because I think the world would make a lot more sense to them. Uh, why we are led to believe certain things and the billions that are pumped in to trying to make us think certain ways. What I found really interesting was you kind of outlined a playbook, didn't you, of
Mhm.
the different tactics they used, like front groups and taking down people. Credible science was questioned or mocked, or NGOs were funded to appear as if they were um, alone standing well-to-do NGOs, and in fact they were actually, or they very much appear to be funded by industry, and they're posing as these very innocent, non-biased parties to tell you why, say, GMOs are great, or pesticides are benign to your life and you shouldn't worry about them. So yeah, I don't know. Stacy, would you be able to tell me a bit about that, or us?
Sure, sure. Well, first of all, I love the way you put that, that it helps the world make sense, because I think this stuff is hard to look at. It's certainly hard
Yeah,
to do as work every day, but it does make the world make more sense. It helps fill in the backstory about why things are the way they are. And I find that incredibly helpful to know. And that's
yeah,
why we wrote this report, to share what we were finding. And we had, as you said, it's very well documented, and it's really in the company's own words. It's based on a huge trove of internal corporate documents
hmm,
from Monsanto, now Bayer, one of the leading chemical and seed firms in the world. And we had two sources of documents. Bayer and Monsanto are getting sued by 100,000 people in the US who develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma due to, they say, exposure to glyphosate. And so those lawsuits have caused huge numbers of documents to come into the public realm through discovery. So we've been posting those all on our website at usrtk.org, and we were tracking and reporting on those trials. We also, separately than that, we started US Right to Know 10 years ago, really as a research tool to try to figure out what was happening behind the scenes of these very intense disinformation campaigns.
hmm,
And so we've filed public records requests at universities and government agencies, across the country, and we got a whole nother bunch of documents that helped us start to piece together the front groups, the money trail. Just as an example, there are lots of professors from prestigious academic institutions who would promote GMOs and pesticides, claim to be independent, and we suspected they were working with chemical companies. They said, no, 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 we're not, but we were able to get the documents to show they were, and to show how those systems of connection operated behind the scenes,
yeah, gotcha.
channels of influence. And, ultimately, there were lots of messengers saying the points of the pesticide industry. We have to have these pesticides, they're perfectly safe, GMOs are fine. And it all really traced back to a few, um, really, I think of them as bullies, but people in the middle of this whole knot that set the messaging, and coming straight from the pesticide companies, and then through all these routes of seemingly independent sources. So we had all these documents, and we decided that, and they were reported on worldwide. There were lots of news coverage about the Monsanto trials. They're still going on. And the company has been hit with billions of dollars in settlements and jury awards. So it's just a mess for Bayer. And we
And
decided to use the documents to, as you said, come up with the playbook, like really look at and lay out how they run the disinformation campaigns. And I was even shocked. I've been following this stuff for years, and I was even surprised when you put it all together, because it's just all the ways that it's possible to manipulate public opinion. They're hitting it hard
hmm,
because they have to. They
they
actually
do.
really have to do that
Yeah,
to keep their business model going.
especially right now, I feel like there's some kind of oh, like it's global, but definitely in America, you see a massive awakening of just more people speaking out, um, like by like my Instagram is full of people speaking out about this stuff, which gives me massive hope. And then obviously your work and Callie Means and Zach Bush, Dr. Zach Bush, that gives me such huge hope because I think you said one time about sunlight, about like casting light on these issues. The more we talk about it, the more we tweet about it, the more we expose it, drag it out into the light, the more we get to push back on it. And what I really admire about your work is they have millions, if not billions, at their disposal in their war chest to make our heads spin and make us think badly or divide us against each other. And yet, you guys were brave enough to and hardworking enough to together a report like that and speak up about it, even though you knew that they do track people like you and attack you and try to discredit you in every single way. Same I've seen with Aaron Brockovich, who wrote a great book, the Superman Isn't Coming, Superman's Not Coming to Save You, and Michael Mann and a few others that I just see this complete attack against the people that are speaking out. But now, as everyone seems to be popping up around the same time, much to your much due to your work and the people like you in the world that are all putting this stuff out there bravely, and it's amazing because the more that people speak up, the more money they'll probably throw at it, but the safer it gets for us all to like rise at the same time like a tide to push back on them, and like I can't explain how happy I am to be able to talk to you about all this because I think you're one of the main people that has pushed this in the right direction. So, like, hats off to you, definitely. It's amazing, and especially in a country like the US where it feels more, and this isn't to say that the EU doesn't have its own challenges, but it feels quite hijacked by corporations that are steering their narrative constantly, and they're really like the playbook you were talking about of, discrediting mommies, organic mommies, saying like that they think they're above normal people, even though the groups that are concerned mothers who don't want chemicals in their children's food or their water and want them to grow up healthy. That has nothing to do with being rich and snobby. It's a survival and wanting us all to be healthy. So like again, hats off. I'm amazed at the work you've done. Um, yeah, well done.
Well, thank you. And I want to say it's a lot, I think there's a great awakening happening. I think that people are um, understanding that what we eat, what we have around us, how we participate in the economic system is directly tied to our health and well-being in all ways. It's all connected. I always say that one of the wake-up moments for me in this work was way back in the early 2000s. There was a lot of studies coming out about chemicals in our bodies and in our urine, our blood, and our breast milk. Really, the science became available to measure about 20 years ago. And one of the studies that I wrote about in my book found hundreds of industrial chemicals known to be toxic in the umbilical cord blood of newborns. And so, I mean, when we see that picture that, babies are born pre-polluted with industrial chemicals and pollutants, we
True.
just have to say, how can we do things differently? And I feel like a lot of people are coming to that question and gathering into groups, and it's a powerful movement. So there are millions of us,
Yeah,
and yet we hear, it's the companies that have the bullhorn. And you mentioned, think yes, the EU has its challenges for sure, but I think it's important to point out also that the US is in a whole different level of corporate capture. The power that corporations have here, it's total government capture, really at this point. And, we also have the highest rates of chronic disease, a third of people having chronic diseases of all sorts. And most of our farmland is devoted to GMO pesticides, corn and soy, that's not even feeding people. That's what's really important to point out. The system of industrial monoculture farming is mostly not feeding people. It's going to feed cars through biofuels, and also factory farms and cows as animal feed, and then ultra processed foods. So we have most of our farmland devoted to not healthy foods. If you can even call them foods, with the ultra processed foods, corn and soy oils, and
Poisonous foods.
so much science showing that that's really a key to the rise in chronic diseases that we see, and obesity in kids and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So there's just so many signs that I think people are feeling in our personal lives that things need to change. And the food system is something tangible that we can do something about. The systemic change is huge and urgent, but we can also make the personal changes in our own lives, choosing healthy whole foods, and also, detoxifying our lives and also our minds from the messages that we hear
Yeah.
about how we need to live and be.
And critically thinking about the stuff that's coming at us. Like, I so often, these, if you picture a boardroom of people that are experts with PhDs that are well paid, all sitting around strategizing how to spin our heads and manipulate us, um, often they appear like us. They appear like they have the same values. But if you're watching, say, an Instagram reel or whatever they're called, and at the end of it, the way I try to feel it is, if you walk away feeling like there's no hope, or that the efforts are silly, or just give up, don't bother. That tends to be the ones that are the leaders of the misinformation, if or the headlines that are kind of very confusing and don't offer solutions. That's one way I can identify it, by just, if it deflates you, if the fire goes out, that you listen to someone like you speak, or the other guys we just mentioned there, and there's a real sense of hope, and you go, yeah, we can do this, we can get healthier, we can increase our health spans again, which you were talking about the US. I heard it's I'm always trying to be very careful that I don't want to gloat about the EU, because it does have its problems, and I'm watching it, but I think there's like an 8 year life difference between either Europe or America, or America and Japan, or somewhere where they compared it, and a lot of it leads back to the amount of chemicals that are just circulating in the system.
Mm.
Now I'm after losing my train of thought. That was too much to take on there. I've opened up too many tabs. But oh yeah, so if you do listen to people like you guys, and you have this real sense of, we can do this, and then all of a sudden you look at somebody that appears like one of you, but deflates your hope, or says it's all nonsense, or we don't, the chemicals that we're using in our products are so minimal that you shouldn't worry about it. Like, these are just environmentalists and people fretting about climate change. They're just overreacting. It's all fine. It isn't all fine, because those minimal levels of chemicals, yeah, maybe in one product, but you're getting smashed by all the products around you that might have a minimal level of the same chemical, and it stores in your body. And even this whole concept of bioaccumulation, I was new to that. The idea that um, a plant which gets sprayed with pesticides, God forbid it's a GMO thing, that lodges there, whatever the badness is. Then either the animal eats it and it gets lodged there, and then we eat it, or we eat the plant and it gets lodged in us and just keeps building up. That's something that, I think in much of my youth, I never realized that what I was eating, I felt like I was getting away with it, not realizing that it's this kind of stacking on top of itself. And I know the body can detoxify to a certain amount with certain foods and maybe going to the sauna and all these things. But ultimately, if we're getting pummeled from all sides, our bodies are going to take ultimately a beating that they're not going to be able to withstand over the long term. So yeah, sorry, I
Well,
just
we
went off on a
certainly,
tangent.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot, right? And yes, it's true. There's some chemicals bioaccumulate, and it's why they find some of the most northern reaching parts of the planet where you think would be pure and pristine have some of actually the highest levels of chemicals because they bioaccumulate up the food chain. And so whale fat, for instance, would be some of the most potent toxicants that
Wow.
people, indigenous cultures are eating or using. But the challenge of, and this is hard to wrap our heads around this, as you were just articulating, because there's so many different assaults on our bodies coming from lots of different places. And yeah, we've had the argument with companies, well, it's just a little bit of toxin and you can't prove it causes harm. One of my best examples there was years ago, we tested some baby products and lots of baby shampoos, and we found formaldehyde in a top-selling baby shampoo, Johnson's baby shampoo. They've taken it out since, but that was after a years-long fight. But we would have this argument where most scientists were not willing to come out and say, or even the industry people were not willing to come out and say, well, a little bit of formaldehyde in the baby's tub is just fine. But there was the few who would say that, would
Yeah,
say, are we really arguing about formaldehyde? It's a known human carcinogen, but those studies are mostly done on male workers and bigger people. And we're talking about a smaller amount
baby.
than baby's
Yeah,
tub. But why is it possible to make shampoo without formaldehyde? Like, can that be when that's the question, the answer is a
that's
clear
mm,
yes. And not only yes, but we already know how to do it. And many companies already are doing it. And in fact, Johnson and Johnson was already doing it. We were able to prove, this was how we got them to change, that they were making non-formaldehyde versions of the shampoo in Europe and elsewhere around the world. We actually tested the product in 13 countries and we looked at the labels. We didn't even have to test it. We found that they were using formaldehyde releasing preservatives in the US, Mexico, Canada, and not in Japan, not in Europe. Why? Because they have better laws
yeah,
in some countries. It was banned in, I think, just a couple of countries in Europe, not even the EU, but they were just, knew better. We better stay away from this ingredient in this country that has a stronger set of laws. So we had to fight really hard in the US to argue and to say, like, that's a double standard. And
mm,
we want non-formaldehyde shampoos here because there's absolutely no reason for a baby to be sitting in a tub with formaldehyde. And by the way, shampoo is just one product that a child might be using in that day that may have
mm,
formaldehyde in it. And so it's the big picture and it's the little people really
yeah,
that causes the concern. And if you look at it that way, there's really just no argument that it's not a worry, that there's small amounts of carcinogen in lots of different products.
absolutely. And it's all just down to a race to the bottom for costs, and obviously
That's right. And
to
people would
influence.
say often to me, why don't they just change? Because it's an easy change. Now, it was an
Mm,
easy change in the sense that, they already had the formula for non-formaldehyde, but any
yeah.
change is going to cost companies money. That
If
was the thing that we found out. And even a small, tiny cost is something they weren't willing to bear if they could get away with not spending it.
Yeah, and it's really down to the sense, isn't it? When I was looking at, you'd walk around. Tesco or your version of Walmart, say, and you're looking at the difference in prices, and you realize that we even do it like, there's a mouthwash for 150 and there's one for 140. We'll choose maybe the 140 because, so it's like it's the same blueprint, obviously just a lot more vicious, and they're a lot more aware of what they're doing. And for us, I guess the products, the majority are the same unless they say that they're not, that they're free from that stuff.
It's,
Yeah,
I want to just, on that point, I want to say, it's a baked in blueprint with corporations because they are literally have to make as much money as they can.
yeah,
As long as they follow the law, their entire purpose is to maximize profit. And that's a collective agreement that we're all making, that makes any kind of sense as a way to run an economy. And it's getting us exactly what you said, a race to the bottom. And as companies and billionaires get more and more power, they're just writing the laws to enable them to get more and more money and power. So it's a fundamentally unsustainable system that needs to change in deep way.
absolutely. You touched on that about, I think it was about a week or two ago. I read it or heard you say it, that they're trying to push in laws where they're untouchable, say in pesticides, where you can't say sue them or whatever. That the system, they're figuring out a way to protect themselves within America or wherever. It's the same thing, same tactics you do everywhere. They'll just push as far as they can until they get, unless they meet resistance, they're going to steamroll as far as they can in every country they're in, um, for the race to the bottom. Not to take it personally, they don't give a damn about health or the environment or whatever. It's literally just to boost profits. It's not to be taken personally in that sense, even though it impacts us very personally. But they're literally only looking at the figures. Um, and what you were saying was that like with the legislation, if they figure out a way to protect themselves long term in a country, that's a very that's a hard thing to even unravel. It's like the polluter pays agreements. I've read stuff about how in Texas it was one of the first places they figured out a mechanism to be safe, that you can't get kind of sued for these polluter pays things, or not sued, but you can't unravel certain legislation that easily once it's put in solidly in.
Mhm.
And that's a scary move, because that means that if they do it there, if they figure out how to do it there, then that blueprint is copied maybe in other states and then other countries. And it's because we do have legal frameworks and regulatory frameworks that you can't somehow unravel them that easily. So it's all the more important, I think, maybe you might agree, to once you recognize that that's happening, that play, to push back on it, in this, because not that it's not too late, but it's all the more harder to unravel once that play has been played and they're successful in getting it over the line. Um, do you know what I'm talking about with the that type of
Yeah.
legislation? Or that was you, I think it was you, about the
Well,
pesticides.
I don't know, but I don't know. But here's what I will say about it. Um, there's a constant fight over the law, as you're pointing out, because the law is the only thing that constrains corporations. And as they get more power, we see a big push to deregulate, to buy politicians, to come up with all sorts of ways to disempower the law, our collective agreement to hold them accountable. And because as I said before, companies need to make more profit every quarter. That's their purpose, as long as they're constrained by the law. So those laws are really the way that we can rein them in. And in the US, we really have a weak political system that's very beholden to corporate interests. So that's why Europe is ahead in a lot of environmental and health safety mechanisms that we just don't have here. But one thing we do have here is a very strong tort system where consumers can sue companies for harm if you can prove that their product caused harm. And this is why companies like Bayer are facing billions of dollars in settlements and jury awards in the United States over glyphosate, which is the most
Very good.
widely used herbicide on the planet. And many farmers and their families and groundskeepers and people who even work in home gardens have been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and lots of science linking that to glyphosate. So that's a big problem for Bayer, and companies are trying to end run that with a new scheme. I wrote about this recently, and again, it's Johnson and Johnson in the lead. And this is, I just want to shake my head for a moment and say this is often comes across as one of America's most trusted companies, supposedly. It's over 100 years old. It sells, I
Yeah.
think most of us have
We
J&J
know
products
well
in our
here.
homes. But this is a company with a long rap sheet of harm causing products that they've gotten caught knowing that things were harmful, selling them anyway. And then, at the end of the day, they make more money than they spend on these lawsuits. So I
Yeah.
guess that's a capitalist win, but it's a loss for human health and consumer trust.
Yeah,
They're trying to
absolutely.
get around the tort system now with a move called the Texas two-step. They did this recently there's a bunch of lawsuits in the US on talc in baby powder.
The
And Johnson's
asbestos
baby
stuff,
powder
right?
historically contained
Yeah.
talc, and links to ovarian cancer, and lots of women who use the product for decades are suing the company. And again, huge jury awards, billions of dollars.
Wow.
So faced with these lawsuits, what they did was they spun off their liability to a new company, which then declared bankruptcy. We can't pay, we're bankrupt, even though the company itself is very financially healthy. So that's moving through the courts. They've not gotten away with it. It got rejected in 2 lower courts, but now they're appealing it to the Supreme Court. So it's a case that lots of companies are watching, hoping that maybe this will be the way they can finally get around consumer liability. But
Yeah.
I tell that story to point out, like, the system is getting stronger and more aggressive in finding ways to protect itself and to keep these deadly systems in place. And at the same time, we have this growing awareness, consumer movement, people saying no, in understanding that the things we eat and the things we bring into our homes, the way we live our life, all amount to our health and the health of our kids. And so how do we make better choices within a toxic, harmful system?
Yeah.
It's a big challenge because we really have to recreate the way we do everything. And I think that process is happening now. And it's exciting to be alive and doing this work at this time.
Yes, it is. It's again, it's the massive awakening that I guess we're all hoping for if you're in the know of it, but unconsciously people are hoping for it anyways. If they don't understand what's going on, they still see the chronic diseases and everything skyrocketing around them, and to then slowly but surely realize, oh, there's a lot of people gathering. There's momentum right now that I haven't seen in years of looking at this stuff. That right now feels good. It feels like social media and even it's entering mainstream conversations in politics, to make America healthy again. Say that we should. It doesn't matter. I'm not politically affiliated in any ways. I'm just happy that it's actually reaching people, you know, and Doesn't matter where it's come from. Seems that you guys call it bipartisan. It should be a bipartisan issue that I can see that there's a lot of thoughts in your mind right now of
Oh, it's a
all of these.
contentious time politically in the US, and
Yeah,
it's a crazy time when yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just say about that, it needs to be higher on the priority list of all the politicians, because that movement that you mentioned is coming from a third party challenge, because that's what it's taking to bring it to the attention of the two-party system, which is
right.
really fundamentally undemocratic system. And one of the reasons why Europe with a proportional representation system is a better democratically. Because
Yeah,
we here in the US have two parties that are captured by corporations pretty much wholly. Um,
yeah.
that said, I want to say
I
that
see the
there
same thing, by
is
the way,
a
Stacy.
true, yeah, and there
Yeah,
is a true desire, and this is, I think, one of the strongest bipartisan issues for children's health, for a healthy food system, for toxic-free products. I think that's
yeah.
something that most everyone agrees with. And
You
so how do we get it done politically?
That's it. So it's bipartisan on the lower level of the people.
Yeah.
And then if you've ever heard of Paul Check, he refers to the White House as the corporate headquarters. And I, like, you look at it and you go, oh my God, it is. There's either side or wherever you look, you know that they're influenced massively by special interests. Massively. In fact, it's more influence. It feels almost like, I know a lot of people. I have a lot of family in the States, from both sides of the political spectrum, or both political parties, and like what I'm kind of figuring out is it's almost like we, the people, or you guys over there, almost need to say to them what you guys want, because they're only serving basically the top level special interests, and the normal people are paying a massive price for it in every which way. And if you're in the know like you are for years now, you can see this so obviously. You can see so obviously how hijacked it is. And then,
Mhm.
even down to like the agencies being captured. It's a lot of stuff to clean up, and kind of, I don't know, like clean up shop, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of shocking, and I do see the same over here. Like they say about the EPA. I think it was, I even think it was it the Monsanto papers where they said, we'll call our friends in the EU, in the EPA, in one of the countries of the EU. So it's here as well. There's people getting hired that have a very specific agenda, or they've come from an NGO, or the industry itself, and then they go into to these regulatory agencies, and they influence legislation there, and it's just, I I I really think that the playbook that has worked in the US, we should not be so naive in the EU to think that that isn't just right around the corner if we don't keep an eye on these things too. Like it's a sliding scale, and what I've kind of realized as well, it's like you make progress, but it's like the fight is never over in one way, which sounds disheartening, but that the attack, they're always on the attack. It's always on the attack. So it's like if you as the public rest, then they'll just keep bulldozing on. And if you feel like you've won, then right around the corner again, there they are, ready for the next fight, or next Weasley way that they can manipulate us, or unravel things, or show science that is misleading. Yeah, it's heavy stuff. Can I, Stacey, Africa and GMOs is the same stuff, right? That sounds like one of the most vulnerable places on the planet, which we probably all know. It sounds like from your work, it's really been taken advantage of now as well with GMOs, glyphosate, uh, and all these big plans of how the world is shaping the green technology future that we seem to be promised that is going to save the world. And in actual fact, I think it's doing the exact opposite, and it's getting us into bigger trouble than um, like we're being conned into this green technology revolution that technology will save us, and Africa looks like it's been completely hijacked now as well. And I think you wrote a bit on that, or you've done some work on Africa. Um,
Yeah.
could you
Well, they're
talk about that a
trying
bit?
in Africa, and it is one of the most vulnerable places on the planet with the highest numbers of hungry people. And of course, that's because of decades of colonialism and plunder
Yeah,
and, structural by design. It's also one of the few places on Earth that has not been fully taken over by the monoculture corn and soy faux food system that we have. And so there's a lot of interest
yeah,
amongst speculators and people hoping to make big profit in industrializing the food system there and getting subsistence and traditional farmers off the land and taking that land for, profit making schemes. And GMOs do fit into that. And GMOs are fundamentally really about patenting food so that corporations can own it, and also has shown over decades to be really mostly about engineering food to withstand more and more and more pesticides.
that's it.
So that
Yeah,
a pesticide like glyphosate will kill everything green except for the plant that's been genetically engineered to survive it. Um, and this is terrible for soil, for biodiversity, for health.
yeah,
And so African groups are fighting very hard against this industrialization of their food system and saying we need to invest in agroecological systems, and we need to, be able to save and use and trade traditional seeds. And companies and foundations like the Gates Foundation is very involved in this as well, really want to pass laws that make it harder for farmers to save and use traditional seeds, and pass subsidies so that governments are having to pay for patented seeds and chemicals. And really, that this system, it's often referred to as the Green Revolution,
yeah.
sort of a,
I,
euphemistic term of industrializing food systems and putting farmers on a treadmill of debt and high cost inputs like pesticides, fertilizers, and expensive seeds.
my my father studied horticulture, and he was kind of always aware of these GMO seed things. And we had a conversation about half a year ago, I think, where he talked about farmers. He couldn't recall if it was Romania or Bulgaria, and a lot of them were committing suicide because they had gotten into this GMO seed um, business model where they were promised high yields for their seeds. They got rid of their perennials, the long lasting seeds. And then eventually the yield was so low on the seeds that they bought that would only last 1, 2 years. You know all this, sorry, I'm just explaining to the viewer probably. That they ended up jacking up the prices, extortionate prices for new seeds. They had probably laws in place where they couldn't use their old seeds anymore, so they were sitting ducks, and a lot of them committed suicide. I looked through as much of a Google search as I could do, and I could find nothing on it. And then I read your report just not so long ago, or briefly scanned over it, I went, Jesus Christ, that's the same model. So they've been doing this for a long time. It's probably not new, but they've been doing it. And Africa is obviously one of the most vulnerable and easily corruptible places to do this. And it's so kind of when I read your take on it or your report, I just went, oh Christ, that's a real thing, and they're really the bringing in legislation to not allow farmers to save their own seeds or trade amongst each other. That's the stuff that these guys are doing, and it's also amazing that a Gates Foundation, Bill Gates, by the way, Bill and Melinda, if anyone doesn't know who that is, um, that they're somehow implicated in it, shocks me. And like, that's the book, right? I went hiking with a few friends a few weeks back in the Alps in Germany when I was over there visiting my family there. And one of my really smart friends, PhD and everything, we ended up talking about Bill Gates, and he said he was just reading this How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. And he was so um, he was so taken in in a way by Bill Gates's plan, and he couldn't see through it. He didn't see it, and it kind of shocked me. I was like, damn it, because I know that if I wasn't kind of in this stuff as much as I am, I probably wouldn't see through it. So I'm
Mhm.
kind of, it does shock me that a guy that wise about so many things was like, this is the way forward. It's the only way forward, and we've been fed this massive. Well, I think he's wrong. Let's say that way. I don't want to. No need for a lawsuit or anything, but genuinely think that's a horrible way to save us from climate or environmental issues. And the big picture I see is that this is actually going to do more damage to the world than good. Um, and like what we were talking about with the GMOs, I that was even an issue that maybe up until a year ago went completely over my head. I just thought people were overreacting a little bit. It's only seeds. They're only. I thought people were jumping up and down about the idea that we're playing God here and we shouldn't be. We shouldn't, like, cloning the Molly the sheep kind of thing. And I just thought, oh no, this isn't this isn't that big of a deal. No, it is. It's part of a big business plan that those seeds increase resistance to pesticides over time, and then you need more and more and more pesticides. So it's and if you look at how much carbon the soil stores and the importance of nature in that way, it's just getting pummeled by all these pesticides. So like the GMO equals glyphosate, I think you wrote it somewhere, is just so
Mhm.
on point. Just to like just think both, think the pesticides, herbicides, and everything else, and GMO right beside one another. Um, yeah, it's shocking. Sorry, I went off on another tangent, but it's
Well,
just.
I have a few things to say about that. First, I have to show you a book. Um,
Is it
it's a
another
better,
Bill Gates book?
it's a better book.
No,
It's a better book
oh,
than
it's a
one.
Bill Gates.
It's a there's a lot of problems to discuss in relation to Bill Gates. This is Timothy Schwab, independent reporter who's done amazing work
Wow.
tracking and really explaining why the Bill Gates problem is a huge problem of unaccountable power. I want to say about Bill Gates, he's a prophet of techno optimism.
Yeah.
And not only is he a prophet of techno optimism, there is a massive communications campaign behind him to present his reputation in that way. There's an entire two Netflix series adulating Bill Gates. I think this is important to say because that reaction your friend had, it's by design.
Yeah.
People are propagandized at to believe this
And it's the
about
smart
Bill
way,
Gates being a
right?
savior. And
Yeah.
it's seductive because people want to believe that there are solutions to these problems. I've had these conversations too, where they say like, no, I can't believe that that's a problem because I like actually I'm really resting a lot of my own sense of well-being on the fact that somebody out there has an
Yeah.
answer.
Someone
But
smart. Yeah.
someone has an answer. But with Bill Gates, his entire success has been built around monopolizing.
Yeah.
This is his superpower. He is a master monopolizer. He wasn't a technological genius. He wasn't the one who invented. He was the one who figured out how to fully monopolize. And he was in trouble for this, right? Like with the
Yeah.
Department of Justice went after Microsoft and said this is an absolute against the law monopoly, like dirty business practice,
Unfair. Yeah.
own the field.
Yeah.
So his mindset now around fixing food systems and fixing the climate is also wealth maximization and monopolizing, like
Mhm.
industrial food systems, GMOs, patented seeds, patented everything, patenting all of life is a great business proposition for
Mm.
companies like Microsoft. It's not good for the food system. On the climate, if you look at what Bill Gates is doing on the climate, he's evangelizing on nuclear power plants. And the reason there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that Microsoft, which is obsessed with AI, is
Mhm.
actually using AI to figure out how to get through regulatory hurdles for nuclear power plants because they need power to power AI. Gates said recently, well, AI is only going to cause about a 10% increase. No, he said far less than a 10% increase in power needs. Okay,
Oh,
think
that's
about
all.
we already
We're already
are
struggling.
struggling with like we can't with industrializing nations and how are we going to power life? And no, we just need another extra 10% to power AI. No big deal. We'll just build power plants. And
Yeah.
there's a massive propaganda campaign around nuclear power plants for that reason. So it's just, yeah, I think it's really interesting to have these conversations with people and think for ourselves about where our ideas come from about who's
Yeah.
going to save us and this myth of the good billionaire. And I did
Yeah.
try to watch that Netflix series. It's really interesting because Bernie Sanders presses Gates on, do you have too much money? Several people are asking, do you have too much money? Like, are there structural inequality problems that need to be dealt with in order to feed people?
Yeah.
And then the series goes off and gives Bill Gates a good long time to explain, like, basically why he deserves this money. It's very crass, actually, propaganda. For
Yeah.
someone, I say that as someone who studies propaganda. Um, there's just a lot of tricks that go into trying to shape public opinion around these issues, and I think it, as you said earlier, shine light on them
Yeah.
helps people to find ways to see through them.
Absolutely. I'll never forget the recordings of the legal proceedings where he's just there angry sitting there and you see his the real face on him. What, like he's been like exposed right now. He's got the mask on constantly of the good guy with the sweater and like innocent,
Yeah.
unassuming. Why would I be one of the bad guys? Warren Buffett is backing me. I've said I'm going to give away all my money when I die. All of these things, and you're just like, God damn it, this is all, it's all it's all trickery as far as I'm concerned. And the Oregon bill, are you aware of this kind of thing? Paul Check, I listened to an interview of his, and they talked about getting rid of small farmers, and they dropped his name into the thing. That now, since then, I did look it up a bit, but I have not found anything to link them. But it would fit in completely in line with the idea of get the animals off the grass, um, uh, it started off apparently as like the large CAFOs, the closed
Mhm.
area confinement, whatever. I can't remember what the acronym is for.
Confined
But
animal feeding operation.
sorry?
A confined animal feeding operation.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And if you understand what Tyson Foods and all these guys have been up to, then you understand the logic behind regulating them and all that stuff. But it's what people were jumping up and down about is that it is now rewritten legislation to include small farmers, or in fact even aim at small farmers. Now, if you say you've studied propaganda, what I'm trying to figure out is this a sneaky way of either killing the small farmer out or making it look like, hey, it's a cry for help for a small farmer, when in actual fact they're they're actually doing what they're saying they're doing and regulating factory farms that are polluting their waters and
Mhm.
using high levels of antibiotics and all this stuff. And I haven't figured it out, and I don't know. It probably will
Yeah.
come to. Do you have anything to say on that one, or is that still?
I haven't followed that particular debate, but I know what you're talking about, and I just will say that we absolutely need and have to protect small farmers and
Yeah,
encourage people to farming and really think about how are we going to decentralize farming and localize food supply systems. Like
yeah,
if the pandemic taught us anything, it's how utterly vulnerable and fragile the global food system is. And we
yeah.
just need to be finding ways to survive in local communities. So I
Damn
guess
right.
I'll leave it at that and say I do think there's lots of solutions and that everybody has a role to play in, just being a leader in your own community like you are, to stand up and say, here's what it takes to live healthy in our own lives. And then also, as communities, we are going to need to make some changes going forward to ensure that our children can survive on this planet.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah. I mean, I watched the documentary, is it Farmageddon in America? Also quite, uh, I sent it to a friend who has an organic farm for chickens, hens, and to produce eggs. And he said that was probably one of the most depressing things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Not to discourage anyone to not watch it,
Watch
but it,
these films. Food Inc.
food
2 is also recently out and very good because it really focuses on the corporate control
yeah,
problem, the increasing corporatization and concentration.
yeah,
Um, yeah, that's which is really we're in a race against that. Um, but yeah, I just really want to leave people with hope too, and I'm sure you will in your
absolutely.
book
Yeah,
because you've been doing a lot of aspects of, how to provide in a business sense good and healthy systems and foods. That's what we have to figure out.
yeah,
It's like I said earlier, it's an exciting time to be alive, to be growing up, to be in school, to be young, because the young people are going to be the ones that have to figure this out.
yeah,
Um, but we need to create whole new systems and really challenge the logic of capitalism that
yeah.
the winner take all system is going to get us anything but, a Bill Gates evangelist as our only hope. Like,
Please,
please give
Bill
us
Gates,
more hope
please.
than that. We need more hope than that. And
Yeah, the software guy is
the
coming
hope
in to
lies
save the day.
within us, not within a savior, supposed good billionaire. It
Yeah,
really lies within all of us to challenge the systems of oppression and toxic everything. So I figured out during the pandemic, and I'm lucky to live in Northern California where there are lots of small farmers and farmers markets, and I was able to buy most of my food from the weekly farmers market, and I really continued that. So
lovely. Yeah,
that food should be available to everyone, and that's my goal in this work.
yeah. And I 100% agree, Stacey. 100%. we have the regenerative farming is what gives me kind of the biggest hope.
Hmm.
Uh, and yeah, it's taken off in Ireland as well, a good bit, and that's very hopeful because it is allowing people to buy locally, give them access to good healthy food, and move away from whatever the industrial stuff and food that we only buy in the supermarket, but rather that we get it locally from our local farmers and butchers. My family are farmers, and my the older generation before that were butchers. So I've a whole idea of that. Um, when I speak about Bill Gates and my friend being completely in the zone of Bill Gates, what I also see is, and it's probably controversial, but a lot of the idea of take the animals off the land, um, and produce lab meat, that we can go further that way. And what I see is that not only is given room to GMOs and pesticides and all that stuff, it's creating the idea that the chemical future is the way forward, and that's so it should it feels wrong, and I think it is wrong. Not and I've nothing against vegans, nothing against vegetarians. I was vegetarian myself for a long time, so I'm not trying to stir a pot there. But what I'm slowly arriving at the conclusion, or I did a while ago, is that the promotion of taking the animals off the land uh, by environmental enthusiasts and vegans is feeding into. I've seen the propaganda on the other side where they go, well, turns out we just need to take the animals off the land, put them into smaller confined spaces, i.e., factory farms, and we create lab meat for the rest of the stuff that for the rest of the people who don't want to eat meat. So for me, that is like a closed loop business concept all in itself, and it feels like we're falling for it hook, line, and sinker, instead of say it becomes an issue on diets when one side is saying the other side has to eat a certain way because it's actually pushing factory farms. This is a very controversial topic, but it's actually pushing factory farms up, and they are on the increase right now. And that's a scary thought because
Hmm.
I'm watching the most prominent environmentalists who have gone vegan over the years, and they're pushing that agenda, and it's actually fully in line with Bill Gates's agenda, and
Hmm.
that is for me a scary, scary thing because I really see it kind of moving that direction with the propaganda that's happening. Um,
Yeah.
it's a layup, you know. Um,
Right. Um, yes, I wanna say my views on that. Then I'm gonna have to go here, but I
yes,
think this is really important because um, it's a false solution. It's a false solution that really fits within the logic of the current market, is why people like Bill Gates are pushing it. By that I mean that you're right that these technologies are being used in ways that are nefarious, but posing as
the
supposedly a
savior.
solution. So for genetic engineering on that side, there's a lot of experimentation around genetically engineering animals, specifically for the purpose to allow them to fit better in confined, crowded, hot, unhealthy conditions, factory farms.
Yeah,
Let's just engineer them to be better in factory farms. That's a chilling thought. It's also, I mean, it's full of hubris. It's lacking a
it's
fundamental
bullshit.
understanding of
Yeah,
nature and the interconnectedness of all things. And all of these so-called solutions that we're seeing from the optimists and the genetic engineers really fall, I think, within that frame of fundamentally not understanding the interconnectedness of nature. And so that engineered solutions create more problems, which is what's happened with genetically engineered plants. They were engineered and they have a very rudimentary understanding of how these complex natural systems work. So, okay, they figured out how to change a gene so that, or introduce an aspect of a plant that it will tolerate glyphosate. So now you can use more and more glyphosate, but then weeds become resistant, and now we have super weeds, and now they can't even get rid of them with glyphosate. They need lots of pesticides. Like that's what's happening on farms. And the faux meat, let's say cell cultured meat, patented cell food technologies, whatever. Gates is invested in a lot of these companies. I mean, people want to eat fake meat, that's fine. Mostly people don't want to eat it. So it's been failing as a business model because
Yeah.
nobody ever bothered to ask consumers what did they actually want in this space. But really, this is just another way to sell corn and soy as food. So they're building these huge factories in, say, Nebraska, the middle of corn country, where they call this technique synthetic biology, but basically genetically engineering algae to taste like food, to have certain flavors, to have certain textures. So basically feeding corn and soy into factories, adding genetically engineered algae to make it taste like stuff or have the consistency of beef or whatever and spit it out the other end as food. It's an ultra processed food. We already know ultra processed foods are unhealthy. We don't know what's
Yeah.
in these foods. It's there's a video online, the best way I can explain this, about this firm that Gates is heavily invested in. It's called Ginkgo Bioworks, and it's a Bloomberg video that shows the inside of the factory, like a day in the life of this factory. What I saw, it was supposed to be a promotional video posing as a news story. That's how, again, the propaganda angle. What I see is a factory with no people,
Yeah.
no nature, full of plastic, full of chemicals,
Yeah.
like feeding corn and soy into factories, adding chemicals and genetically engineered stuff and sending it out as food. There's your solution that is taking up a lot of space and air, to your point, in the environmental movement, as like, well, we have to do this. This will fix
Yeah.
us and save us. No, it won't. We have to fundamentally change unjust colonialist systems that colonize humans, developing nations, nature, this mindset that we can control nature, shifting to a mindset that we're part of nature, that everything we do has a consequence for the system. And so we need to find ways to work in concert with systems in ways that are agroecological to create our food systems, because what happens to the soil matters,
Yeah.
right? We can't subsist forever on monocultures of corn and soy.
Yeah.
It just is not, it's not going to sustain us. And it's a hugely fragile, vulnerable system to disruption.
Yeah.
And just the idea that we're reducing the number of seeds, reducing biodiversity down to this sort of mechanized way of farming and growing that can be controlled by corporations. A lack of diversity is not a side effect of the system, it's the purpose of the system. Uniformity is something that companies are able to control, and so they want a uniform food system. But we need to survive a diverse food system that considers the ecology of all things. So I think that's the awakening that's happening and the understanding. And I just hope for people to see that fake meat is not going to save us. And Bill Gates is not going to save us. We have to save ourselves. And I think all of us should really actually be learning how to grow our own food.
Well said, Stacy. Thank you. That it just confirms everything that I've thought, and I love hearing it from someone as credible and well read and a veteran in the industries or in your work. It's really appreciated. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank
And
you. And I look forward to seeing what your book and keep me posted.
yeah, thank you. I will do. Take good care
Okay.
of yourself and hopefully speak to you again sometime. Thanks a
Yeah,
million.
anytime.
Take
Okay.
care.
Thank
Have
you.
a
Have a
nice
great
day.
day.
Take care.
Have a good
Bye.
evening.
Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please hit the follow button, and so you'll see more of my content in the future. It would really mean a lot to me because I'm just starting out. Thanks, and see you soon.